Technology. This afternoon, Chad's going to get into a little more workshop type material, how to utilize the things that are out there, being able to identify what they are, and I think it's going to be a really, really great conversation. Jace, do you have the slide for the Q&A on it? If in the course of the day, we're going to be having our 5 o'clock Q&A after this session. If you have questions that come up during any portion of this today, feel free to send those to me. Hopefully we'll get that, maybe not. I forgot to actually give him that slide for this presentation, so that's my bad. Bad use of technology on foul number 32. So you can either email me at this address, you can shoot me a text message with your question. I've gotten one or two already this afternoon, but also, you can use the technology of an ink, pen, and paper if you want to do that, and you can jot it down and hand it to us, and we'll try to explore the things that are going on. But looking forward to this conversation with Chad. If you would join me in a quick word of prayer, then we will turn it over to him. Oh Lord God above, we are so grateful to be called your children. We are grateful to be able to serve you every single day of our lives and have the opportunities to do great things for your glory and in your name. Father, as we enter into this further conversation about technology and our uses of it, we pray that you bring wisdom to Chad and that you help him to share the things that he's studied and that he knows about in a way that we can understand and that are useful to us. Father, help all of us to learn that discernment in these tools that are available to us. We know that they can be used for great things when wielded with the right heart and the right mind and when given over to your hands. And we pray that you just help us to develop that mentality that seeks to do good with the things that we have at our disposal. We thank you for this time, and we pray your blessing upon us as we discuss all this today. It's through Jesus we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much again for allowing me to come and cut your Sunday afternoon naps short. And I appreciate so much you being here and being here an hour early. This is usually a session that's an hour or more. If I go too quick, I'm going to try to slow myself down. But if I go too quickly or you need me to repeat something, or you have a question at any point, this is not a one-sided talk this afternoon. If you have a question at any point, I want to hear from what you have to say. And so if you have a question, please let me know. We're calling this device control in your home and beyond. And I put in your home and beyond because kids have their devices out and about all day, every day, with them all the time now. And so we need to be aware of that. Did want to make a little bit of a plug before we get started. I have a YouTube channel and a website, a proper website and a proper YouTube channel that I have just started back about 2 months ago or so. I never had either the whole time I've been doing this workshop. And so I am sharing videos and different things there. And I've got lots of resources, and I'm building a lot of different stuff at digitalparentingworkshop.com. So if you'll go check that out for me and go view some of those videos, a lot of the content that you're seeing today will be covered in a lot of those videos and different things like that. So again, appreciate you very much on that. Let's start off with a couple of comparisons. Some of us will walk into a cell phone store, and what do you see? You see black rectangles, right? They're all black rectangles. Yeah, some of them fold, and some of them do wonky things. I understand that. But what we don't understand, maybe, is that even though they have an Apple or an Android on the back of them, and they're different operating systems, they treat privacy and they treat parental controls sometimes very, very differently. My one piece of advice for families when we're talking about the technical aspect of phones and things is to at least try to be on the same types of devices. You don't want a mix of Android and Apple, and you don't want to kind of mix and match those things. And if you're on Android, you want to get probably, and try to at least, I know it's impossible sometimes with work phones and things like that, but try to get the same brand of phone and the same model of phone if you can. And so again, Apple has kind of a less open system, a strict app submission. They want you to have parental control settings on the device. They want it to be built in. Apple has a very good, they have made them very good. They used to not be very good at all, but screen time, and you can start with that if you're just at a loss for parental controls. And so if you ever want to start with that, you can start with that if you don't know where to start. On the Android side, it's way more open. There's less strict app submission. They prefer to have parental settings in other apps, other third-party apps, not made necessarily by Google. Google makes an app called Google Play Family Link that we'll talk about here in a few moments that is really good, and it works on iOS and Android as well. And so anytime I say iOS or iPhones, I mean to talk about iPads, iPhones, iOS. Anytime I say Android phones, I'm talking about every brand of them. The Google Pixel phones, the LG, Samsung phones, all of those different things, okay? And then I actually threw in Amazon. Amazon has actually got an Android-based Kindle Fire tablets that are actually sell really, really well, especially around Christmas time, and they're really good for smaller children, and therefore, but they have a limited kind of app store and a limited kind of way of looking at that. And so, again, we may walk into a cell phone store and see, well, these all look the same. They're not the same necessarily, okay? Any questions on that? Every slide I'm going to try to make sure I stop for questions. One, to catch my breath because the air's thinner here. So, and y'all laugh because y'all know it's true. I'm like huffing and puffing going up the stairs, okay? Seriously. I'm looking forward to being back in Tennessee. Here's a few things that as a parent we need to make sure of. And again, all these slides will be available at digitalparenting.com. We have them up on the computer. Corey can post them to the website, and we'll have them accessible for you later if you want to do that. So you can take pictures of them if you really want to, but these will be accessible for later if you want them. Make sure your child hasn't purchased another device, or make sure that your child has not gotten another device in their hands, because this happens all the time. I've heard from parents that say, well, my child was doing all this stuff on this other device that I had no clue that we even had in the house. Apparently there is a huge, and I'm sure it's the same here, huge kind of gray and black market for old broken iPod touches and iPhones. Kids will sell them to one another for $30 and $50 and maybe even less, and they can still use Wi-Fi. They can still use another account that you may not have under your control, and so you need to know if there's another device in your home. Some of the internet routers that I'm going to be talking about actually have a feature to where if anything unauthorized logs onto your Wi-Fi network, it's not going to let them access anything until you say it can. And so again, we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. Make sure your child knows not to sign into someone's iCloud or Google Play account. Now somebody tell me, and this is where participation comes in, what does the iCloud account on an iPhone and the Google Play account on an Android phone, what does that control? Anybody? Okay, what else? What else does it have on there? I'm looking for a very particular word here. Yeah. You can access other people's information, is what you said? You can access your information for sure. Hopefully not other people's through their iCloud account. Yes. The particular word that I'm looking for is everything. Because those accounts control everything on the device. You've got credit card information, app download history back. I could go back to my first apps that I downloaded in like 2008 if I wanted to. It controls everything. It syncs contacts. It syncs all the things that y'all said, but all that stuff. So make sure that they know not to sign into someone else's account, because you can do that. Now, if you have screen time or restrictions set on that device, they should not be able to do that in the first place. But again, kids were at one point, I know they were signing into somebody else's iCloud, downloading an app that they had paid for, that they didn't want to pay for, and then re-signing back into theirs. Only they're kids, and they forgot to sign out, and then they spend $400 on Candy Crush. So that's happened. And so we need to make sure that that doesn't actually go through and things like that. They will not have, if you have restrictions set, they will not have access to that, which is that last thing on the slide here. make sure you have parental controls or restrictions set on whatever device your child uses. That's one of those duh statements, but again, we need to make sure that that's the case. Yes, sir.
One thing that we've encountered before, sometimes when we get updates on these devices, depending upon the nature of the update, it will reset all of that.
Yes.
So be prepared to, one of the things, and it's for all of us, just because you get this new fancy update on iPhone or whatever, doesn't mean everything's still the same. Go back and just double check them, make sure everything's set the way that you want it or that you figured out.
And if you have to do something like put that on the calendar every month, every first Monday of the month, I'm going to check my kid's phone, and I'm going to look at their settings, and I'm going to audit all this stuff and make sure it's still going. We had that happen. I'm glad you mentioned that, Corey. We had that happen with my 11-year-old's iPad, and if you know my 11-year-old, he is a little tech genius, and I am in trouble. And he found out that he could search things on his built-in search. He doesn't have Safari, he doesn't have any of that kind of stuff, but he could search things pulling down on the Siri search because I hadn't blocked it because the newest update had disabled stuff like that on our router level controls that we had in place. We had all our parental controls coming from the router, having multiple walls of security, having these multiple kind of barriers and fail-safes here. Did you know that the city of Jericho actually had a double wall, had 2 walls? Why was that? Well, if the people, the invaders, got over the first wall, the archers sitting on top of the second wall could just pick them off, right? It was a very, very good and fortified city. And so, again, when we think about that, we should have more than one wall between us and between the wide open internet, especially for our families and for our children. This first wall can be a number of different things, and I've only got a few examples on each one. I used to give a laundry list of like 30 different things you could use. I really just kind of narrowed that down to 2 or 3 things per, because let's be honest, you as parents don't have time to look at all these different options and things. You kind of just want to be sent in a direction, and I completely understand that. But at the church building at Graymere, we actually use something called OpenDNS. It's a matter of pointing its router settings and change a few numbers on your phone and whatever device your child uses, and it will protect them while they're out and about as well. So OpenDNS is really neat. I put 2 brands of a physical Wi-Fi device right there, TP-Link and Eero. It's not that I don't trust any other brands, it's just that I found that those work the best in my experience, setting it up we have a seniors tech ministry at Graymere, and I've set up several different Wi-Fi routers, TP-Link and Eero, and they seem to be the easiest ones to set up. Eero to me is I use that at my own home, and it actually for $2.99 a month, they'll give you really good filtering and stuff like that does not, it's almost like that first wall of protection before it even gets to your kids' phones. So it's really, really neat. We'll talk about those in depth here in just a second. The second wall is your built-in parental controls, or I put a third-party app or service. And when I say third-party app, I mean something not made by Google, something not made by Apple. Family Link is made by Google. Screen Time is obviously made by Apple. And so, again, I would start with those, but if you need some things that are more in-depth, you can go to things like Life 360 and Our Pact. We'll be talking about those in depth as well. And then, of course, I've gave you 2 examples of that wall number 3. Now, wall number 3 is not very much fun. I'm going to be honest with you. It is these app-by-app audits, because the stuff that's not covered in the first 2 walls, you got to make sure that you're clicking and going through the settings of things like Netflix and YouTube and Disney Plus and all these other different apps. And you got to make sure that all of those things are set. And like Corey said, when it's updated, you got to make sure that those app settings stuck and that they're still there. Okay, any questions before we kind of move on? All right. So I talked about Eero before. Eero is a really good brand of router. I've used them for several years now. They're really tiny little devices. My rule for Wi-Fi routers is that if you cannot remember the last time you replaced your Wi-Fi router, then it's probably time to replace your Wi-Fi router. And so if you go there and there's a layer if you can write your name in the dust on the top of your router, it's probably time to replace your router. Now, some of you may have internet service providers that do not allow you to use your own router. Does anybody know if that's the case for them? Does anybody have a combo modem router? You just have one little box. Okay. Back here, that's probably not going to be a thing. You're probably locked in, so you probably can't use a device like this. What service do y'all have?
I have T-Mobile, but I use it just as a modem, and I do have a separate router.
Okay, so they do let you do that. Okay. And some of your device providers, I mean, y'all probably what happened is you just let the service companies set it up and you really probably haven't touched it since then. Am I right? Okay. I'm not right about you, but for most people, that's probably the case, right? So what you can do is you can set up your own router for most services out there. I know AT&T has some things to where they want you to call them and authorize the router. It's kind of a mess a little bit, but suffice it to say, I live in a really nice place where we have internet from a co-op. It's really, really nice. And they literally just bring the copper to your house and say it's up to you after that. It's a nerd internet dream is what it is. And so I love being able to get my own equipment. I can get my own modem, my own router. If you're in that spot, then you can use something like an Eero. You can do all these things. I'm not going to go through these things individually. But odds are you'll probably get faster speeds because these new Wi-Fi routers use something called mesh networks. It's like placing a blanket of Wi-Fi on top of your house. It's not a single point broadcasting like old routers. It's like a blanket, a grid of Wi-Fi that you just have in a certain area of your house. And it's going to give you faster speeds too. You can do a lot of different things. You can pause internet access. You can schedule access. You can see unauthorized devices like I talked about before. It'll pop up on your phone saying, hey, there's a device we don't know about. Do you want to authorize this or not? And you can say no, and it will not allow that device to access the internet. My favorite is our boys have iPad time from 6 to 7 p.m. every night, and it's like their veg time. They just sit there and watch their things and whatever it is they do, right? And at 7 p.m., I can hear from in the backyard, I can hear the weeping and gnashing of teeth. When that internet turns off for them, they're like, Daddy, the internet. And it's like a surprise every night. I'm like, guys, I don't know what's going on. It's time to get in the bath. It's just time to get in the bath. Come on, let's go. And so they're not smart enough to do that now, but again, we need to make sure that we think about these. That is the schedule that I have them on. So you can schedule it and it will turn off for you automatically. It'll do some work for you. I was talking about the Eero Pro service earlier. You got some pretty sophisticated filtering. And when I say sophisticated, it's not hard to manage. It's literally just turn this on, turn this on, turn this on, turn this on, and it's really nice. And whenever we update apps or go to the App Store or we download a game for our kids, we have to go into the app, we have to turn everything off, and then we have to download it, and then we have to turn everything back on. And it's a little bit of hassle, but it's one of those necessary things that we have to do. So it's very good.
Of
5 years. And if you've got a router, if you've had internet in your home for 10 or 15 years and you've never replaced the router, it's absolutely time to replace your router. But if you're just getting to the corners of your house, or you're going out just to the back door or the back porch and you're not getting a good signal or not getting good speeds, routers do wear out. The components they lose their power, the capacitors start leaking, all sorts of different things. And so they do lose broadcast cables or anything like that. It's super simple. And their app is very well designed, and it'll walk you through the steps, and it's actually really nice. Walmart, Best Buy, Target, and Amazon, they're pretty much available everywhere. You can get pretty good deals on Amazon if you want to look those up. Any questions? All right. Let's keep rolling. I'm covering everything. I'm being stellar up here covering every single thing if y'all don't have any questions, right? That's what it is. So here's just an example. They're little bitty things. I mean, they're like the size of a cheeseburger. I mean, it's unbelievable how amazing these things are. And they're so small, you can get multiples. The one right here, the beacon, actually literally just plugs into the wall, and it's going to talk to the main one, and you don't have to run any cables or anything. It's pretty fantastic. Okay. My second wall, we're getting into that second wall here of apps and services thinking about our parental controls. And we're at 25 after, so I better get in gear here. Start with Google Play Family Link and Screen Time. And if you need more in-depth services, you can go with some other parental control apps that you may have used or may have heard of. Apple has really good documentation on Screen Time on their website, but they also have a whole YouTube playlist that will walk you through everything that you need to know about screen time. And it is just great. Just go to apple.com and you can actually search screen time and you'll come up with this page. It'll give you all sorts of different things. This was just part of the page. There's a bunch of different topics below this. So screen time is actually pretty great. It's what in combination with the Eero filters, it's really all I use right now and for all three of my boys. And the only thing that I would add when they start driving is going to be Life 360, because I think I can accomplish pretty much everything I want to with screen time. Apple has consistently updated screen time. Google Play Family Link, Google has done a very good job updating Family Link and keeping it up to date to where it's really, really all self-contained for Android phones as well. It's really good. Here's kind of a cheat sheet, and this is iOS 12 or later, so this would apply to anything. We're on, 15 now? And so if you go through your settings and screen time, you set that screen time passcode, and that passcode needs to be different from the actual passcode to get on the phone, of course. One thing, number 3 up here, is very interesting. And again, this is for iPhones only. I don't know about necessarily Samsung or LG phones or any of that kind of stuff that have face identification, but you can actually go into settings and Face ID and add an alternate appearance. And so you can actually set somebody else's face on there. And so you can have your face on there for ID as well as your child's face too. So make sure that you do that, because you do not want to be in a situation where your child has locked you out of the phone. And so I'm not going to unlock it for you. And they've locked it down. That actually happened with a mother at Graymere. And she came to me and said, my child has locked me out of this phone. And and she's like, what would you do? And I said, well, I'd be going to jail because that child would be dead. And I mean, it's kind of that crazy. And so you don't ever want to even be in that situation. You should always know their passcode and should always have your face logged on. Of course, I got here to audit. When I say audit, that means just go through these settings. You want to go through privacy settings, Game Center. You want to make sure that all the social media accounts specifically don't have access to your child's location. You don't want to make sure you don't need them to use the location except for maybe weather and maps. And that's about it. Twitter does not need to use your child's location. Facebook or TikTok does not need to know your child's location. That is data that we do not need to make sure and make available to these big companies. And then I have set up family sharing. Before I go on, is there any questions? Okay. Ooh, don't get me started about Bark. Do you like Bark? Do you have Bark? Do y'all use it? Okay. What has been your experience? I still can't get past the setup process. I tried to set it up on my child's iPad probably over a year ago, and I gave up. I said, nah. And so I emailed Bark about it. I said, hey, this is so difficult. Why is it hanging up right here? Why is it so? And I was in communication with them for a little while about how to improve their app, and then they found out I did these digital parenting things, and they started, oh, we want you to talk about Bark. And I'm like, look, I can't talk about a product that doesn't work. And I tried again before we started the fall. I had a bunch of these fall sessions, and Bark, but if you don't know what Bark is one of these apps that it's literally supposed to look at the child's screen, and by using AI to kind of gauge what there might be some harmful speech on there might be some violent content, nudity, things like that. And it's supposed to flag those things, block those things, and then send you a notification. Do you find that works? No? but it doesn't stop them from listening to them.
Again, we get a lot of notifications, we get like one notification that you look at the history of the day. So I mean, again, it's a lot of stuff that you have to personally
Right.
read through and look at and try to do further investigation, see what it really is. Because we've also got kind of false positives.
Yeah.
This website is not something that you should be looking at, but then especially violence.
It turns out to be like ESPN or something.
Well, we got kids who enjoy airsoft guns and beating boys.
Yeah, and the
It'll trigger a violence notification when they're watching silly videos of guys playing airsoft.
and which brings up another great thing is that no filter, no artificial intelligence, no app is going to be perfect and 100%. That's a good thing. But thank you for mentioning Bart, because I wanted to mention it, but it's one of those things. I recently tried like a month ago to do it again on my 11-year-old's iPad, and I could not get past the setup process. And I'm like, I'm a nerd. If I can't figure this out, then how are the average parent or the average non-tech person supposed to figure this out? So again, I'll be communicating with them a little bit if I can. And it's got great promise. They just really need to develop that app a little bit more. So thank you for mentioning that. Any other comments, questions? So yeah, the last one here on this list is family sharing. If you're not using family sharing on iOS, it's kind of great. And they have a similar thing with Family Link. You can actually share app purchases and songs and movies and things like that you've bought, and you can share all that stuff. The big thing, though, is approving and disapproving apps, and it'll send you notifications for those types of things when they want to download an app. And you can always say no and say yes later, but you can actually approve those different things. We've got this turned on for my 11-year-old now, but not my 8-year-old and 5-year-old. Because they don't actually have their own iCloud accounts now. Which brings me to another thing. When your child gets to a certain age, it's probably best if you get them their own iCloud account. I would say 10, 11 years old, because you can control that account a lot more than having it attached to a general account. Does that make sense? You can control it a lot more with it not being attached to your account as a parent as well. And so you can set it up from the get-go as a child account. Now, Apple has some weird things. They think that 13 makes you just a very responsible individual if you turn 13 years old, and they turn off that child account on that child's 13th birthday. So that'll be a thing that you need to make sure that you have those parental controls still set after they're 13. But there again, you can still set it up as a child account. Any questions, any thoughts on that? All right. Covering everything. Find My is really nice. Make sure that you download it and make sure that you enable it on your devices so that you can find things when they get lost inevitably. This was one of those lessons that I had where one of my children, who will go unnamed, left an iPad in Kentucky, and had no idea where it was at, but we knew it was somewhere in that Commonwealth of Kentucky. And if we'd have had Find My on it, we could have found it lickety-split, but he left it somewhere, and we have no idea. We still don't know where that iPad is. And the problem was I had not loaded this app and signed in and make sure that it registered it with our iCloud account. So make that check. Make sure that your child's devices are attached to your account. I can see all of our devices. I can see all of my devices. I can even see all of my wife's devices and where they're at, which comes in handy when she misplaces her AirPods for the 3rd time in one day. So I'll be like, they're right here in the couch cushion, right here. Google Play Family Link is really fantastic if you have an Android phone. It's really fantastic if you have an iOS device too. You can use that as well. They make it cross-platform. But you can do all sorts of things, not just these 3 things, but you can lock their device. You can see all sorts of different activities that they're using. If your child has a Chromebook at school, you can interface with that, and they can do all sorts of different things and go with teacher-recommended apps and things like that. It's very good. And they've done a lot of stuff to improve it here really lately in the last just 6 or 8 months. So does anybody have any experience with Screen Time or Family Link? Using it? Yes, using it? No? Do you find that what is one of your number one frustrations with who's using screen time right now? Okay. What is your number one frustration with it? Or a frustration? Not having enough of the screen time. Am I right? Okay, good, yeah. But, no, but seriously, what is one of the frustrations?
It's kind of easy to kind of guess the password. It's just like when your parent uses the code from the phone to put into add the time, the screen time, it's kind of easy to guess the password.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody else? What are any roadblocks you've run into with like using these things, screen time or whatever? I wouldn't say it's all inclusive. It's a pretty good thing that they've built for these things. Yes. I love it that like the kids are responding to this now. That's a new interesting angle. Go ahead.
I'd say one of the frustrations with screen time is I feel like it might sometimes stop you for time even if you aren't using it or if like you're just listening to music and that you are. So that's a little frustrating sometimes.
Because it literally logs the time that an app is being used or something when you're maybe not even really using it. Yeah, I can understand that. So, but hey, if that needs adjustment, then talk to your parents, and that means it's working, I guess.
Yeah, that was just a little bit of my comment earlier about settings being readjusted. Apple's been notorious for that.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a minor update, it doesn't tend to do much, but if you go
But the big OS's updates,
big
yeah.
iOS update, then you just about are guaranteed to have to go back in and reset everything.
This latest iOS was the only one I've not had to do that with every device that I've had. So they must have done something to optimize that. When I went from 13 to 14 on my boys' iPads, I had to change everything back. Had to go through it. Me and my wife just sitting there one night for 3 hours, just just doing all sorts of stuff on it. And so again, yeah, be sure to check these things periodically.
That's a frustration, but we've actually really loved the value behind it. Because
Yeah.
before the phone ever got introduced, we at least had the iPads going, and we tried
Our Pact.
We did that one for a while.
It's okay.
That one was frustrating, more frustrating because VPN that you had to download really got in the way of anything. Whereas screen time is great because it's being built in. It doesn't interfere with the necessary things that the system functions that you really do need to have going. Whereas our pack did.
Yes.
I actually really enjoyed screen time overall. It's been very well done.
And interestingly enough, Our Pact, we're talking about this app, we'll talk about it here in a minute. Our Pact on Android did not require you to download that VPN because it had enough hooks into the system to be able to do that kind of stuff because Android allows you to do that kind of stuff. Apple does not. Apple is very strict and very protective, which is why they have offered screen time as like so many options that you can just tick away and tell screen time that you don't want your kids to see. But yes, it's been a very, very good tool for us so far. Anything else? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I could understand how that'd be a little frustrating for sure. Right. Right. That would be good. We should file a bug report for that. Absolutely. Okay, any other things? Any other comments? Okay, there's Family Link. Life 360, anybody use Life 360? A lot of people love Life 360. It's pretty fantastic, especially if you have drivers in your family. I put it's Find My iPhone on steroids. It's really not. It's a whole new kind of thing for kids especially. And you can get detailed location tracking. If you have some versions of the app, I think you can see how fast they're going on the highway, which I'm glad was not in when I was learning how to drive. And so anyway, you get a lot of good stuff. Does anybody pay for Life 360? Anybody pay for it? I've never met anybody that's actually paid for it yet. So you can pay for it, and you get a couple of extra things, but everybody seems to really, really love their free tier. So it's a very, very good app. Again, if you've got older kids, this wouldn't be necessarily good for younger kids, but older kids that are out and about quite a bit, Life 360 is pretty great. Even works on iPhones pretty well too. Anything about that? Any thoughts about that? Yes, sir. When they run out of data, it doesn't work, does it? Oh, I didn't know. I didn't think about that. Because if the data cap has been reached, then it's not going to obviously send that data. Ooh. Boy, that's a very, Go ahead. And absolutely, and that goes back to what we were talking about this morning. That goes back to your just good old regular parenting right there. And you've got to build this trust with me, and if you leave your phone somewhere, then guess what? You probably won't have a phone for a while. That's how it's going to work. I'll trade you out, and I'll give you the little flip phone that we had 20 years ago. Or just take the car. There you go. Do anything that Family Link can't, except for it can monitor text messaging. And so monitoring text messaging, if that's important to you, especially on Android phones, that's one of those things that you might look at OurPact for as well. And again, there's a lot of other apps. We talked about Bark up here for a second. If you download Bark and you do their 7-day trial and it works for you, then more power to you. But Bark is just not one of those apps that I can really endorse wholeheartedly yet. It's a great idea. They've got great potential, but the implementation is just not there yet. And some of these apps that are coming around here in the next few years are going to really change the game when it comes to digital parenting and parental controls, I think. It's going to be really cool.
Hey, Chad, one quick thing on the Life 360. A lot of our attention, we're focusing on parenting and on use with our kids, but that one in particular actually has a lot of use for adults as well, particularly for maybe senior citizens.
It does, actually.
Those who are beginning to get a little further up in years. My parents use that because my dad will go fishing, but he may leave the house at 3:30. Maybe there's something to also consider. This is not just about helping your teens navigate this. This is even for adults.
Absolutely. And Life 360 has emergency roadside assistance, but also, which is good for anybody, but also the new iPhones and the Android phones for the last year or two have something called crash detection. And if they have detected that you've been in a car crash, they will absolutely dial 911 for you if they're still, of course, operating, which is really, really cool. The Apple Watch Series 4 and above has something called fall detection. And it really works because my mother fell and broke her arm in the garage, and I got a message about it. And my mother is not the one she doesn't want to trouble me with talking about those things. And I'm like, Mom, you got to tell me when some of these things happen. I knew that you'd fallen, and I knew that, and she actually had to go to the hospital, broke her arm in 2 places. And so again, this is applicable for all ages and for all sorts of people, okay? Very good point. All right, let's keep moving, or we're not going to get done here. Do mention Amazon and Amazon Kids Plus for small kids up to ages, even up to age 12. It's really for a little bit below that, probably up to age 10. It's really kind of a great thing to put on to, you can actually use this on Kindle Fire devices. And Kindle Fire devices are very cheap and inexpensive. And so if you're on a budget and you have little kids and you want something for them to look at that's safe, and you can get this. It's actually really great because it puts a whole nother user interface on the tablet, and it's a whole kid-friendly kind of thing. It's not like the iPads. I wish the iPads had a kid mode and not just the regular mode all the time, but this is really cool for Amazon Fire tablets. Just wanted to mention that really quickly. Okay, let's get down to one of the last things we're going to talk about, and that is our app-by-app audits, and that is the things that we have to go app by app and go through the settings. One of these companies does a really good job of parental controls, and one of them does not. Can you guess which one does do a good job? Correct. Netflix actually does a pretty decent job of parental controls. Let me show you really quick. So if you go to netflix.com/account on a computer or an iPad, you have to go through the browser to look at your settings. And you can change these settings. I've got all these lists right here, but I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like. So here's what our account page looks like. We got one for me, we got one for my wife, we got one for the boys. And so you go to parental controls, and you can actually, let's see if I got a laser on here. You can actually go to all maturity ratings. Of course, you wouldn't have that in place for your child, and I don't have that in place for me. I just had it up here for an example. But you can actually do a profile lock, because you can require a PIN to access that. So even if my boys can get on Netflix, which they cannot on our Apple TV at home because it has a PIN code, we have PIN codes for our PIN codes. You know how that goes? And so if you have a PIN code, they have to have another PIN code to access our specific profile. But on the boys' profile, they don't have a PIN code, just a PIN code to get on Netflix. And so you can actually go down here to restricted titles. If that looks like weird, so those are like weird Indian cartoons that we blocked because they were annoying. And we told our boys, like Dora, we blocked Dora too. And they're like, why can't we find Dora? And I'm like, I don't know. You know, it's like, oh, I guess they just don't have it anymore. But anyway, we did that, but that's actually real. I joke around about that. But now think about this. In the summer of, maybe it was 2020, maybe it was 21, maybe it was before that. Anybody remember the show 13 Reasons Why? If you had PG-13, if you had a 14, 15, 16-year-old in your house, and you had PG-13 on there, guess what popped up real big on the banner when you logged into Netflix? 13 Reasons Why. Now, if you know the story behind that, I guess it was a series, right? I didn't watch it. They glorified suicide. They made this kid out to be a hero because he had committed suicide. That is not something. Not kind of an idea that we want to do that. So this comes in real handy when you want to restrict specific titles. You don't want your kids to see specific things, getting them exposed to certain ideas about things. It's very, very handy on Netflix. We blocked Horrid Henry too. We don't like his attitude. But we did all these other things, and we put TV PG, and that was even one of those things where we're like, well, if we put TVG, that cuts down the catalog significantly. So PG, we'll have to watch and see what it's rated. And that's what we've trained our boys to say, is to say, what is this kind of thing where we are going to be talking about older kids and what they're going to be doing and watching. And we've trained our boys to say, okay, we're going to watch this, and we don't know what that is, so what's it rated? And they'll know what it's rated, and they tell us. Oh, it's rated that, we can't watch that. So again, that's another one of those things that we've tried to teach them. Okay, let's keep moving. Netflix does a really good job. You can set all the sorts of things. Here's a screenshot of the YouTube iPad app. You go up here to your controls right here, and it gives you this little box, okay? You go into here, and you go into the different settings, and it will show you this settings page. Now, do you notice what it says right here? These things right here are incredibly problematic because I didn't have to type in a PIN code. I didn't have to type in anything to get to these options. Clear watch history, search history, pause watch history, pause, search history. Do you know what pause, watch history, and search history mean? It means I don't want nobody to know what I looked at or watched. That's what that means. And so I didn't have to put in a PIN code, a account password, or anything like that to get to these options. So when we think about that, we need to make sure that we're looking at the YouTube app. I cannot recommend the YouTube app to be on any kids' phones, period. I also cannot recommend the YouTube Kids app. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube Kids that you may not want your kids seeing. It's not all kid-friendly necessarily. A big thing on YouTube Kids is to not allow it to continuously keep playing. What's the thing called? Loop playing, or not loop playing, but what is it called? I don't know. But it plays the next video without you having to touch anything. And so you'll get 7 videos deep on something, and the algorithm picks the next video for you. And it's gotten down to something that, David, I look at my son, I go, David, what are you watching? We're going to turn that off. Because I'm hearing, oh my God, I'm hearing all sorts of different things like that, some things that are worse, and I'm like, this is YouTube Kids? So again, we just need to be aware of those things. I didn't stop for questions or anything, but any questions? Any comments? Corey, we're running late, man. It's like 8. I'll finish up here in just a second. Are we okay? Last thing, if you need to do any of these things on this list, call your carrier. Call Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile and talk to them on the phone. Don't go into the store. Those are good people in the store, I'm sure, but they're salespeople. They don't know how to fix things. They know how to sell you things. I have found talking with a lot of families and talking on the phone to their carriers for them in some instances that they have, AT&T and Verizon specifically, have been extremely helpful in getting SMS data, shutting off these different things, making account adjustments, all sorts of different things. So again, call them if you have any concerns about these things. Okay. I've covered everything. Not really. I've covered barely the tip of the iceberg. So I really appreciate that. I know that was a lot of info, and Corey will have those slides together, and I will turn it over to you. Thank you all very much.